Today we're going to learn about Chapter 6, the cognitive theories of learning. The three people that's in this group is Joseph, Whitney, and Caitlin. The first thing that we're going to learn about is about the information processing model. It's basically a theory of learning and memory. And there's three main stages, which includes the sensory register, also known as sensory memory, working memory, also known as short-term memory, and long-term memory. The executive processing goes in to the information processing model, and it's not automatic. The learner controls the learning process. Example would be memory skills, and imagine studying for a driver's test or falling down. If you're trying to take a study for a driver's test, you're most likely going to clue in on it, and you're not going to pay attention to your surroundings. And if you're falling, you're already going to figure out what you're going to do so you don't hurt yourself as much as you just fall down your elbow and you just break it or something. The first stage is sensory register, and it takes in incoming information for about just a fraction of a second, and it consists of the five senses, which is sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. An example can be drawing with a sparkler, because once you light the sparkler, it lights up and it shoots little sparkles, but once it's out, you're not going to see it anymore. It's just going to be, it's just going to disappear. Again, the information isn't attended. If it's not attended, it'll be forgotten, and it goes with working memory and long-term memory too. And if you receive it, it's known as attention, and if it's processed, this is known as perception, which is you seeing it. An example can relate to basketball. If the ball handler isn't paying attention to their defender, and they're paying attention more to the crowd, then they'll most likely get embarrassed and probably get dunked on. The importance of sensory register. Imagine driving on the road. If there is heavy traffic, you're going to pay attention more to what's around you and what you hear. If someone's honking, and you're probably going to know that they're having a road rage and you don't want to mess with them. So you're going to most likely drive safer. And you're going to pay attention more to the roads than the buildings, and of course, sounds of other cars instead of your radio. Now, back to attention. Paying attention intently means forgetting other stimulus, and losing attention means distracting stimulus. And the distracting stimulus will end up kicking in. If you're watching a basketball game and it gets very boring, you're not going to really want to watch it. You're going to go get a snack or a soda, and when you come back, you'll probably miss like an important part of the game, and they'll come back, but yeah. How to gain a person's attention. So the way to gain a person's attention is that you should use cues such as gestures, repetition, body position, and one's own voice. Such as a comedian, they're gonna move around, they're gonna make you laugh, joke, they're gonna add emphasis to their words just to make you laugh. And the second stage is working memory. It's a stage where students have trouble learning, and it's the stage where you have a storage of a limited amount of information for just a few seconds. It holds about 5 to 10 items for 12 to 20 seconds. It's pretty much like a grocery list. When you write it down, you're gonna learn like the most important parts that you need, which could be like vegetables such as celery or eggs or whatever. And once you write it down, you're gonna put it in your pocket, and then when you think about it, you'll only remember only a certain amount of things. And it comes from both the sensory and long-term memory. And if you keep rehearsing it, which is the repeating of information, you can actually bring the information from your sensory register to your working memory. Or if you do it long enough, it could go from your working memory to your long-term memory. And if you don't repeat it, which is the last and final stage of the information processing model. And it holds a large amount of information. And it can last from forever to almost forever. And it can be both active and inactive. Knowledge helps us understand short-term memory, and the more information that you have in your long-term memory, it'll help you speed up your process from the sensory register and the short-term memory, and then it'll help you learn just like going to school, and it'll help speed up the process of the three memories faster. The problems with memory, however, is that it's hard to locate, and sometimes we just forget. An example can be trying to take a test and like a mathematics exam. and you forget how to solve it, you end up taking a break, or you can go to the next question, and then before you're done, you go back to your question, and then all of a sudden it just clicks in. So we're going to learn about the 3 strategies in long-term memory. There's procedural memory, episodic memory, and semantic memory. The procedural memory is the storage of information about how to do things. You have to take procedures to ride a bike, drive a car. Every now and then you'll fail, and then sooner or later when you get on that bike, you're just going to keep on riding and hopefully not hit a bush. And it also starts at birth. It starts at birth, where you need to learn how to breathe, learn how to eat, potty and stuff like that. Episodic memory is the storage of images of our personal experiences. On the picture on your right is a picture of 9/11 when 2 planes hit the Twin Towers. And the people who lived during this time period, they're actually able to recall what happened, especially the people that lived in New York. The recalling of these important events is known as flashbulb memory. And the last one is semantic memory. It's the storage of facts and knowledge in schemata. Now, schemata, also known as schema in a singular form, is an outline of concepts or ideas. An example can be the difference between a chair and a bench. No, actually, in a way, they resemble each other, but a bench is longer. And while you're young, as a kid, kids will actually think of it both as chairs. So there are also some uses of the information processing model in the classroom, such as providing handouts and using your own voice to help teach the class. Some of those are gaining the students' attention and pointing out important information. And then these are some other ways to help the teacher teach the classroom and help them learn. So a quick review about the information processing model. There's 3 main stages: the sensory register, the working memory, and the long-term memory. If we decide not to keep repeating the information, we will actually lose the information. Forgetting it and not knowing the information are not the same, they're actually different. And the sensory register lasts for a fraction of a second, working memory lasts 12 to 20 seconds, and long-term memory can last from forever to almost forever. There are also 2 other processing models. The levels of processing theory emphasizes that students will learn what they process. The lowest level is remembering something and recalling it for remembrance, such as the name of a person on a phone. You remember the name but not the number, and which goes into the highest level, which means that you give meaning to it. The numbers for the name of the people. The second processing model is the dual code theory. It's when a person can only recall in one type of format, and it usually refers to the visual and mental theory, and it only focuses on visual and mental stuff. An example is using someone's name and remembering their name by their face.
So I'm Katie. I'm going to continue what Joseph started about talking about cognitive theories of learning. And my sections are forgetting and remembering, and how can memory strategies be taught. So what I'm first going to start to discuss is that most forgetting occurs because information in working memory was never transferred to long-term memory, but it can also occur because we have lost access to information in our long-term memory. So over the years, researchers have identified several factors that make it easier or harder to forget information, and one of them is interference. And according to interference, information gets mixed up or pushed aside by other information. So in one classic experiment by Peterson and Peterson, they gave 2 groups of people sets of nonsense words, 3-letter nonsense words, such as MFG or GTV, and one of the groups, they gave them time to rehearse these 3-letter syllables, and then the other group, immediately after they were given the nonsense syllables, they were told to go and do something else. And what they found what they found from this experiment is that the people who had additional time to rehearse the nonsense syllables were more likely to remember it afterwards. The second factor that has to deal with whether or not you're going to remember something is retroactive inhibition. According to this, new information will block information that you have already learned if the information is similar. So in the case of like a kindergarten class, if the students are taught the letter B They might know the letter B and they might be able to tell you everything about the letter B and draw it out. But as soon as you teach them the letter D, they're going to forget the letter B and they're going to mix them up because the information is similar. A strategy to combat this would be to take and teach the letters on different days so that the letters can be in different places of the student's mind. Another inhibition is proactive inhibition, and it occurs when previous knowledge interferes with learning later information. So if you're taught one way to do it, and then someone comes behind you and says, you've been taught wrong, it's going to be harder for you to go back and learn it the correct way because you have already been taught the wrong way first. So a specific example would be like if students were taught how to multiply fractions, and say they were taught to multiply them sideways instead of cross multiplication, they would have a hard time remembering the correct way to do it once they're taught the correct way to do it. So it's important to note that there's a strong relationship between measures of resistance to interference and school performance. So if you're more likely to be distracted and you have about 101 different things going on at one time while you're at school and you're not focusing actually on the schoolwork, your school performance will decrease. This is actually shown with students who have ADHD a lot because especially if they are very distractible, they have a hard time processing the information and remembering it. So there are two different types of facilitation, and it's important to know that facilitation actually helps you learn. So proactive facilitation occurs when previous learning can often help a person learn similar information. So if I'm an English speaker and I go to learn Spanish, and I master Spanish and I study it for 7 years and I become fluent in it, when I turn around and I go to learn Italian, it's going to be easier for me to learn Italian because Italian and Spanish are very similar. They're from the same language family, and it might only take me 3 years to learn Italian, whereas it took me 7 years to learn Spanish. So in retroactive facilitation, it's basically improvement in the learning or performance of a task caused by training later in time on a different task. So, for example, because that definition is a little wordy, a girl who learns how to drive a golf cart when she's 10 will find it easier to learn how to drive a car when she's 15 because she already has experience operating a vehicle. So it's basically taking experiences that you've had in the past and taking stuff that you've already learned in the past and generalizing it to a different concept to make it easier for you to learn. So, primacy and recency effect. It is the tendency to learn the first few and last few much better than those in the middle of the list. So I put like a little, we're learning Sound of the Fury in my English class, so of course this is what was on my mind. And say for example, my professor told us the first 2 bullets at the beginning of class, and then his lecture, the meat of his lecture was right here. And then at the end he said, Quentin commits suicide by drowning. Students are more likely to remember this first chunk and this last chunk and forget the middle. We don't exactly know why it happens, but it's important to note that because of this, when you first walk into the classroom, you don't need to be doing like pointless bell ringers or taking attendance or collecting money, because that's instructional time that could be used according to the primacy effect to teach students better. So another factor that influences whether or not you'll remember something for a very long time is automaticity. And according to this, once you practice something so often, it becomes like a second nature to you. So you're more likely to remember something that you have practiced enough that it's automatic and your reflexes to the stimulus are automatic than if you didn't practice it at all. I put actually a picture of a guy with an oboe here because I used to play oboe and it makes me pretty happy. But it's the idea of muscle memory. If you're sitting there and you're playing the oboe and you're playing a piece and you've played the piece 50 million times, you're more likely to remember that piece, not necessarily because you're cognitively thinking about it, but because your fingers already are used to the piece. So it comes automatically to you. So there are 4 different types of practice that can help us rehearse the information that we're getting to store it to a long-term memory. And one of them is mass practice. This is cramming. So if you've been up all night and you're studying for your accounting test that you've known about for 3 weeks, but you were lazy and you didn't feel like studying until the last minute, you're doing mass practice. It's not very effective. Distributed practice is if you've known about that accounting test for 3 weeks and you've studied every single night, 20 minutes a night, to ensure that you, once you get to that test, and even after you finish taking that test, you will remember that information. Enactment is, individuals learn much better if they are asked to enact the task, to physically carry them out, than if they simply read the instructions or watch a teacher enact the task. So if your teacher is trying to teach you how to light a Bunsen burner, you're more likely to be able to light a Bunsen burner and remember how if you actually do it. I mean, it's kind of common sense. It goes with the constructivist view, but another type of practice is generation. And according to this, if students create something, if students generate something with the information they're given, they're more likely to remember it for forever. So if, instead of sitting here and telling you how to write an essay, if you actually produce an essay for me, you're more likely to remember it. So one of the big questions about my chapter is if memory strategies can be taught to improve long-term memory. And so researchers have identified 3 different types of strategies that teachers can use in the classroom to improve long-term memory. So the first one is paired associate learning, and it's learning to respond with one member of a pair when given the other member, usually from a list of pairs to be memorized. So for example, I have the word dog in Spanish. You can remember that word with the English word dog. So you just pair them together in your mind, you associate them. The second type would be serial learning, which is learning a list of terms in a particular order. So if you have to memorize the periodic table, teachers oftentimes will want you to memorize the elements in order of their atomic mass or in order of their atomic number. So that would be an example of this because there is an inherent order of whatever you're memorizing. Another type would be free recall learning, and it's memorizing a list but not in a specific order. So you can memorize all of the organ systems in the body, or you can memorize all of the programs on your computer, but they're not gonna have an inherent order. You can just memorize them and recall them freely as you wish. So there are 2 other memory strategies. The first one is imagery, which is a powerful memory technique used to help form mental images to remember associations. So like the word for grapes in Spanish is uvas, and so it kind of sounds like you must. And the way I remember the word is I see this crazy mother yelling at her child and screaming, like spit flying all out of her mouth, crazy stuff, yelling, "You must eat your grapes," because it kind of sounds the same. And because I have that image associated with that word, I'm more likely to remember it. The next strategy isn't one that I would use, but I can see how it can be used by other people. It's called the Loki method. And it's a mnemonic device for serial learning that employs imagery associated with a list of locations. So for example, if you go to the store and you think, okay, so in my bedroom, I need bed sheets. In my kitchen, I need forks. In my living room, I need a rug. If you mentally walk yourself through your house, because you have the picture of your head of your house and the floor plan of your house and the different rooms, you're more likely to remember what you need to buy. So another memory strategy is the peg word method. I know in kindergarten I memorized a little rhyme that goes, one is a bun, 2 is a shoe, 3 is a tree, 4 is a door, and it goes on so forth. So what you would do in the peg word system is you would take and say you were trying to memorize the list of the first 10 presidents. You would see our nice little George Washington right here with his wooden teeth. And you would say 1 is a bun. And you would imagine George Washington chewing on a little bun, like a little cake bun, with his wooden teeth. So therefore you can remember, just based on the rhyme 1 is a bun, the associations. Another strategy is the initial letter strategy. I find that I use this one a lot. That's just taking the initials of whatever you're trying to learn and making an anagram out of them. So like SOHCAHTOA, you have PEMDAS, things like that to make it easier for you to remember.
And I'm going to add on to what the group mentioned. My topic is what makes information meaningful. Rote learning refers to the memorization of facts or associations. For example, you can memorize the bones in the body, you can memorize the chemical symbols on the periodic table and multiplication tables. Meaningful learning, it relates to information or concepts learners already have. So silver is an excellent conductor of electricity. This adds on from when you memorize the chemical symbols, and you can add on that silver is an excellent conductor of
The
electricity.
next topic is inner knowledge. Inner knowledge, this is a knowledge that could and should be applicable to a wide range of situations, but is applied only restricted set of circumstances. It consists of information and skills learned in school that we can't apply in life. For example, you may know people that can pass an advanced French test but would not be able to communicate in Paris. Or solve volume problems in math class but have no idea how much sand to put in a sandbox. Schema theory. Schema, meaningful information that is stored in long-term memory in networks of connected facts and concepts. The most important principle of the schema theory is that information fitting into an existing schema is more easily understood, learned, and retained than information that does not fit into an existing schema. For example, the sentence, "Mice and calves can run soon after they are born," is an example because you know that. 1. Bison rely on speed to escape from predators, and 2. More familiar animals such as a horse that can also relate to the bison. They get you to understand that bison are born soon after they can. How do metacognitive skills help students learn? Metacognitive means knowledge about one's own learning or about how to learn. How do metacognitive skills help students learn? Metacognitive means knowledge about one's own learning or about how to learn. The metacognitive skills, methods for learning, studying, or solving problems. For example, reading a book. You may not understand a paragraph, but you read it a second time or more slowly, or look for clues or pictures that help you understand the paragraph. Another skill, self-questioning strategies. Students look for common elements in a given type or task and ask themselves questions about them. What study strategies help students learn? 1. Practice tests. 2. Note-taking. Or 3. Underlining or highlighting information. You can also summarize or you can write to learn, like writing in a journal, or outlining and concepting a map, like a diagram. The PQ4R method. One of the best studying techniques for helping students understand and remember what they read is the PQ4R method. The PQ4R stands for preview, question, read, reflect, recite, and review, which is the 4 R's. How do cognitive teaching strategies help students learn? Well, we can prepare students to learn new material by reminding them of what they already know. We can ask questions and helping students leak and recall new information. How do cognitive teaching strategies help students learn? 1. Advanced organizers. This is an initial statement about a subject to be learned that provides a structure for new information and relates to its knowledge students already possess. Analogies can help students learn new information by recalling it to concepts they already know. Example, you can introduce a lesson on the human body disease fighting mechanisms by telling students to imagine a battle and to consider it as an analogy for the body's fighting against infection. We also can teach them by elaboration, the process of connecting new material to information or ideas already in the learner's mind. For example, give students a list of phrases such as the gray-haired man carried the bottle and the gray-haired man carried the bottle of hair dye. Students recall the second phrase because it elaborates what the man was carrying. We also can teach them by elaboration, the process of connecting new material to information or ideas already in the learner's mind. For example, give students a list of phrases such as the gray-haired man carried the bottle and the gray-haired man carried the bottle of hair dye. Students recall the second phrase because it elaborates what the man was carrying. So, what is an information processing model? The three major components of memory are 1. Short-term memory, 2. Long-term memory, and 3. Sensory register. What causes people to remember or forget? Inference theory helps explain why people forget. Automacy is gained by practicing information or skills far beyond the amount needed. How can memory strategies be taught? Teachers can help students remember facts by presenting lessons in an organized and by teaching students to use memory strategies. For example, verbal learning, paired associate learning, serial learning, and what makes information meaningful. Information that makes sense and has a significance to students is much more meaningful than inner knowledge and information learned. According to the schema theory, individuals, meaning knowledge, is constructed of networks and schemas. How do metacognitive skills help students learn? Metacognitive helps students learn by thinking about, controlling, and effectively using their own thinking process. What strategies help students learn? Note-taking, underlining, summarizing, writing to learn, outlining, mapping, and strategies that help students learn. The PQ4R method is an example of a strategy that focuses on the meaningful organizations and information.